Please share where you're watching from and consider subscribing to the channel. I grew up on the borderlands of Maryland farmland, a place where the air was thick with the smell of cut grass, where the fields rolled on endlessly, and the tree lines cut sharp against the horizon. Being half Cherokee, I was raised with a set of stories my white friends didn't understand. They would laugh if I told them about skinwalkers, about spirits that wore the faces of men and women but weren't either. For me, those weren't bedtime stories. They were warnings. That summer night, the warnings returned to me in a way I wish they hadn't. I was walking through the wheat fields with my dog, Juno. She was a big mutt, a shepherd mix, always alert but usually calm. The moon hung low, a thin crescent, spilling just enough light to paint the stalks silver. Each sway of the wheat whispered against my jeans. The world was quiet except for the rustle of insects and the occasional coyote yip from the woods. Juno's ears pricked forward before I heard anything. Then came the sound, high-pitched yips carried on the wind. Coyotes. They were close, too close for comfort. My chest tightened as I realized we were far from home, too deep in the field to sprint back without cutting through another half-mile of open stalks. Juno gave a low growl, not at the coyotes, but at something else. She lowered herself, hackles raised, her gaze fixed on the line of wheat just ahead. That was when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a child, a small girl standing motionless in the wheat, no taller than my shoulder. The pale light hit her face, and I felt my stomach turn. She wasn't just pale, she was almost glowing, skin stretched too tightly over her face, as if she hadn't eaten in weeks. Her dark eyes locked on me, unblinking, as the coyotes yipped again in unison. She was dressed in deerskin, crudely stitched together, with strips of leather tied around her wrists and ankles. For a moment, I thought she might have been part of some reenactment group, but no reenactor moved the way she did, because she tilted her head, sharp and bird-like, then crouched on all fours. Her limbs bent too far back, knees cracking, fingers splaying in the dirt. She didn't speak so much as she imitated sound, a garbled whisper that carried my own name. Sarah. The coyotes howled, closer now, maybe only yards away. I pulled Juno close by her collar, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The girl scuttled forward a few paces, too fast, jerky, like something imitating human movement, without knowing how. The wheat rattled all around us though no wind blew. Then, as suddenly as she'd appeared, she darted sideways into the stalks. I lost sight of her completely. Juno barked, twisting in every direction, trying to find her. The wheat shifted again, and that's when I saw them. The coyotes. But not like coyotes should be. They came from the stalks in a slow, deliberate line. 3 of them, gray coats bristling. Their eyes were wrong. Too large, too round, reflecting the moon like mirrors. And in the one closest to me, I swear on everything I love, I saw the face of the girl flicker across its muzzle, just for a moment. Pale skin stretching across fur, black eyes replacing yellow. I stumbled back, nearly falling, dragging Juno with me. She barked and snapped, but wouldn't lunge forward. The coyotes only stood there watching. Sarah! The whisper came again, this time from the coyote in the middle. Its mouth didn't move, but the sound poured out all the same. I turned and ran. The wheat clawed at my arms as I tore through it, Juno keeping pace, her panting loud in my ear. My lungs burned, my legs aching as I pushed forward, desperate for the tree line that marked my yard. Behind me, the wheat shivered and snapped, but I didn't dare look back. When I finally broke free into my yard, the night was still again. The wheat swayed gently, coyotes gone, the girl gone, the sound gone. Only the crickets chirped as though nothing had happened. I slammed the door behind me, locking it twice, pulling the curtains shut though my hands shook so violently I could barely hold them. Juno whined, pacing the living room restless. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside, I thought was her. At one point, around 3 a.m., I heard the cry of a coyote right outside my window, but it was warped, pitched wrong, drawn out too long. The next morning, I told my aunt about it. She listened in silence, her face pale. "You stay out of those fields," she said finally, voice sharp. "There are things there that don't belong to us. Don't go looking again." I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, that maybe I'd let old stories mix with my fear of coyotes. But a week later, while driving home, I caught sight of one lone coyote standing at the edge of the wheat field. It wasn't moving, just staring at my car as I slowed. Its eyes black, human, unblinking. I've never really been scared of the forest. Growing up in northern New Mexico, the woods were just there. Part of life. I used to run through the pines with my cousins, climb trees until the sap stuck to my palms, and carve our names into bark like kids everywhere do. But my family is Navajo, and we were raised with warnings. My grandmother told me things most of my friends never heard from theirs. She told me never to whistle at night, never to call out to someone I couldn't see, never to talk about skinwalkers out loud, because speaking their name was like an invitation. I used to nod, used to pretend I believed her, but I didn't. Not really. At least, not until the night the woods started calling me. I was 14, walking home from my friend Rosa's trailer. It was late, maybe close to midnight, and the forest was black as tar except for a sliver of moon. I had my phone flashlight on, its narrow beam catching glimpses of gravel and roots on the trail. At first, it was quiet. Only the crunch of my sneakers and the distant chirp of crickets. Then I heard it. My name. Amy. I froze. The voice was faint, drifting through the trees like a breath of wind. For a second, I thought Rosa had followed me, playing a trick. But it didn't sound like Rosa. It sounded like me. Not just familiar, exactly like my own voice. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Just black trees, swaying a little in the breeze. I told myself it was an echo. Or maybe the way my footsteps bounced weird in the stillness. I shoved my hands deeper into my hoodie pocket and kept walking. But then it came again. Amy. This time it was closer. Too close. Right behind me, like someone leaned in over my shoulder. My chest tightened, and I whipped around, heart slamming in my ribs. The path was empty. No Rosa. No one. I remembered my grandmother's words. Don't answer. Don't look. Don't let them in. So I turned forward, staring straight ahead, and walked faster. My breath was loud in my ears. My hands shook. The beam of my flashlight jumped over roots and stones. But the voice followed me. It said my name again, and then something inside it broke. It cracked down the middle like glass shattering. The pitch went wrong, rising too high, dropping too low. And then it multiplied. Amy, Amy, Amy. Dozens of my own voice, echoing from every direction. Some whispers, some screams, all of them overlapping like a choir of me. I ran. I don't even remember deciding to. My legs just launched forward, pounding the trail so hard my flashlight bounced, the beam flashing trees, dirt, shadows. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The voices kept chasing me, layering louder, until it felt like the forest itself was screaming my name. When the trees broke into gravel road, I stumbled out, gasping, and nearly collapsed. And there was my mom, standing on the porch, waving at me, phone to her ear. Relief slammed through me so hard I almost sobbed. Until she opened her mouth. Come inside, Amy. It was her voice, but it wasn't. Stretched out, like someone imitating her too perfectly. I froze where I was, my chest still heaving. Then the porch light flicked on, and my real mom stepped out, holding a dish towel, confused. The other her was gone. That was the first night. I didn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, covers pulled up, staring at the shadows on my ceiling. Every time I started to drift, I heard it again. My name, in my own voice, whispered from the corners of the room. By morning, my eyes burned red. Rosa noticed right away. When I told her what happened, she dragged me to her grandfather. He was old, skin folded deep with lines, eyes sharp as broken glass. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he spat into the dirt. You shouldn't have talked about it, he muttered. They like it when you talk. My stomach twisted. What was it? Skinwalker, maybe. Flesh gate. Doesn't matter. They mimic. They lure. Next time, don't walk alone. Next time. Those words haunted me. Because of course there was a next time. That night, I was sitting in bed, trying to do homework, when my dog started growling at the window. Slow, deep, chesty growls I'd never heard from him before. My heart jumped into my throat. Then I heard it, scratching. Long, deliberate claws dragging across the glass. And then, Amy. Not outside. Not in the woods. But right there, inches away, like the words were breathed into the crack of the window frame. I slammed my hands over my ears, whispering prayers my grandmother had taught me. The scratching didn't stop. Neither did the voice. It whispered for hours, until dawn finally bled across the sky. After that, it never left me alone. At school, I'd hear it echo from bathroom stalls. From empty classrooms. I'd hear Rosa's voice calling me from behind, only to turn and see no one there. At night, it paced outside my door, heavy footsteps dragging. Sometimes it knocked. Sometimes it laughed, in my own laugh. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. My grades tanked. Rosa tried to stick by me, but she was scared too. She said my eyes looked wrong. Hollow. Like something was eating me from the inside. One night, I woke to cold air on my face. The window was wide open, curtains thrashing. My dog barked so hard he was choking himself, teeth bared at the dark. And that's when I saw it. A figure at the tree line. Tall, thin, its limbs too long, bent wrong. Its face was shifting. My face, Rosa's face, my mother's. Strangers I didn't even recognize, all cycling like a broken slideshow. And in every single voice at once, it whispered, "Amy." I slammed the window so fast my fingers got caught. Blood welled up, but I didn't care. I locked it, pressed my back to the wall, and cried until morning. Rosa's grandfather came the next day. He burned sage, muttered prayers, waved smoke into every corner of the house. But I knew it wouldn't work. I worked nights at a dog kennel when I was 19. It wasn't glamorous. It was mopping urine, hosing down cages, feeding barking mouths, and getting used to the smell of wet fur baked into my clothes. But I didn't mind it. I've always loved animals, and the dogs loved me back. Even the mean ones calmed down after a while if I was the one bringing food. The kennel sat on the edge of town, pushed right up against the woods. The building was basically a long concrete hall lined with chain link runs, each one holding a couple of dogs. Outside was a gravel yard, and beyond that, nothing but trees. At night, when the dogs finally quieted down, it got so still you could hear the forest breathing. One night, that stillness broke. It was late, past midnight. Most of the dogs were asleep, curled in piles of fur and bone. Only a few lifted their heads when I passed with the mop bucket. I was halfway down the row when I felt it, that sensation of being watched. You know it. The prickling on the back of your neck, the way your chest tightens, even though you can't explain why. I froze, mop dripping on the floor, and listened. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Then Jax, a pit mix in the last kennel, started to growl. Low, rumbling, not his usual, "I want food" noise. His eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the chain-link door at the far end of the hall, the one that opened to the gravel yard. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a man. Someone tall standing just past the fence, half hidden in shadow. But no man is built like that. It had to be 8 feet tall, maybe more, with arms that hung too low and legs like sticks. The security light caught its skin, stretched tight, grayish, clinging to bone like it hadn't eaten in years. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there watching. Every dog in the kennel woke up then. First one bark, then another, until the whole hall erupted in a frenzy. They threw themselves against the gates, snarling, teeth flashing. Some pissed themselves, tails tucked so hard they bent their spines. I'd never seen them like that, not even during thunderstorms. The figure didn't flinch. It just stood there, silent, as though it was waiting for me to make the first move. I grabbed the mop handle like a spear, though my hands shook so bad I could hardly keep hold of it. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. And then it tilted its head. Just slightly. A tiny, curious angle, like a child examining an insect. That broke me. I bolted back down the hall, the dogs going insane on either side. By the time I reached the office, slammed the heavy door shut, and locked it, I was shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I sat there for an hour, listening. The dogs kept barking, on and off, restless and terrified. Every time I thought it was safe, another low growl rose up, like they could still feel it outside. When I finally worked up the courage to peek through the blinds, the gravel yard was empty. I told myself I imagined it, that maybe it was just a shadow, or my exhaustion playing tricks. But the dogs didn't lie. They saw it too, and that was only the beginning. The next night, I came in early. The boss had called, pissed because 3 dogs were missing from their runs that morning. No holes in the fencing, no signs of escape. Just gone. He accused me of leaving a door open. I swore I hadn't. He didn't believe me. When I walked down the kennel row, my stomach dropped. The runs were exactly as I left them. Locks secure. Latches shut. No sign of tampering. And yet, 3 kennels stood empty. The dogs that remained were skittish, pacing back and forth, ears pinned, refusing to settle. Some pressed themselves to the far corners as if trying to melt through the walls. That night, when I was cleaning again, the power flickered. Just once. The lights buzzed and dimmed, plunging me into near darkness for a second before humming back to life. The dogs went berserk. Every single one threw itself at the gates, howling, yelping. I knew why before I even looked. It was back. The figure stood in the same spot, just past the yard. But this time it was closer. Pressed against the fence, its bony hands wrapped through the chain links, skin stretched over knuckles like parchment. And it was smiling. Its lips cracked and bled as they curled back, revealing teeth too long, too sharp. The kind of teeth no human ever had. I dropped the mop and ran, heart jackhammering. I slammed the office door shut again, shoved a chair under the knob. I could still hear the dogs screaming. Then, through the metal door, came a sound that froze my blood. Whining. Not the panicked barking I'd heard before, but high-pitched, pitiful whining. The sound dogs make when they're afraid, when they know they can't fight. And then silence. When I opened the door an hour later, 3 more kennels were empty. No blood. No fur. No broken locks. Just gone. The shelter closed 2 months later. Too many dogs disappearing. Too many angry owners demanding answers. The boss never admitted it out loud, but I saw it in his face. He knew something was wrong. Something we couldn't explain. I still dream about it. In the dreams, I'm back in the kennel. The air is heavy with the stink of bleach and fur. The dogs are restless, shifting, whining. And I know it's there, outside the fence, waiting for me to look. Sometimes I see its head tilt through the window. Sometimes I hear the dogs go silent, one by one, like their throats are being cut. And sometimes I hear it whispering, not in words I understand, not in anything human. Just this dry rasp, like wind through dead grass. And every time I wake up, my own dog is trembling at the end of the bed, staring at the window. I never go near the kennel anymore. The building is still there, boarded up, sagging, weeds pushing through the gravel. People say kids break in sometimes, daring each other to spend the night. But they don't last long. The neighbors still hear barking in the middle of the night. It was the summer I turned 25 when the convicts broke out. The news called it an isolated incident, but when you live a mile from the prison, it doesn't feel isolated. I remember that night like it's carved into my skull. The heat was unbearable, the kind of suffocating summer heat where the air itself feels heavy. My wife and I had every window open, fans whirring in every room, and still sweat glued our skin to the sheets. We'd fallen asleep restless, the TV humming in the background, when the first noise came. It wasn't loud, just a scrape. Something against the side of the house. I thought it was a raccoon at first, but then I heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway. Slow, deliberate, footsteps. I froze listening. Then another set joined the first. Whispered voices, low and sharp. My wife sat up, eyes wide, already clutching my arm. The news, she mouthed. The escape. The convicts. We didn't waste time. We slipped out of bed, hearts pounding, and crept into the hallway. Every shadow seemed alive. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door, though I knew it wouldn't do much against armed men. The footsteps grew louder. Then came the sound of the back door handle rattling. Once. Twice. Then a slam as someone threw their weight against it. "They're inside," I whispered. We didn't run out the front. That would have meant crossing the living room, right where they'd come in. Instead, we dropped down into the crawl space. It wasn't much, just a narrow dirt-floored cavity beneath the house, lined with pipes and ductwork, but it was hidden. The hatch door blended with the hallway floor, hard to notice if you didn't know it was there. We slipped inside, pulling it shut behind us. The darkness swallowed us whole. The only light came from thin slivers through the floorboards above, faint lines that outlined dust motes floating in the stale air. My wife pressed herself against me, trembling. I held her hand so tight my knuckles cracked. And then the door upstairs shattered. The sound was like thunder, wood splintering, hinges tearing loose. Heavy boots thudded across the floor. A rough voice barked something I couldn't make out. Laughter followed. Ugly, hungry laughter. We crouched lower, barely breathing. The convicts spread through the house. I could hear them rifling through drawers, knocking over furniture, their voices echoing overhead. One of them whistled. Another muttered something about food. And then came the dragging sound, like a blade scraping lazily across wood. The sound moved slowly from the kitchen to the hall, right above us. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they'd hear it. The floorboards creaked as someone stopped. Right over the hatch. I clamped my hand over my wife's mouth before she could gasp. The air in the crawl space grew hotter, thicker, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Then nothing. The footsteps moved on. For the next hour, we stayed frozen, listening as they tore our house apart. They smashed plates, overturned chairs, laughed at each other's crude jokes. One of them pissed in the sink. Another hacked up phlegm and spat it against the wall. It was like animals had taken over our home. At some point, I realized my wife was crying silently beside me, her shoulders shaking against mine. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but I didn't dare make a sound. The voices grew closer again. This time they were arguing. One of them wanted to leave. Another said, "Not yet. They're here. I can smell them." The words crawled into my bones. They knew. They were looking for us. I thought we were dead. And then the light came. It started as a glow, faint at first, seeping through the cracks in the floorboards. My first thought was that the convicts had turned on a lamp. But no, it wasn't yellow like a bulb, it was pure white. Blinding. It spilled into the crawl space like liquid fire, so bright I had to cover my eyes. Above us, the convicts screamed. Not words, screams. Terrified, guttural, like animals being slaughtered. I heard bodies crashing into furniture, frantic footsteps, a door slamming open. One of them shrieked until the sound cracked apart into a gurgle. Then silence. The light lingered a moment longer, flooding every corner of the crawl space, burning into my eyelids even when I squeezed them shut. And then just as suddenly it was gone. We sat in the dark again. Neither of us moved for what felt like hours. Finally, I pushed the hatch open. The house above was wrecked. Drawers dumped, chairs overturned, glass shattered across the floor. But the convicts were gone. I expected blood. I expected bodies. There was nothing. The police didn't believe us when we called. They said the escapees had been caught 2 towns over, hours earlier. Said maybe we'd been robbed by squatters, or maybe we imagined the whole thing. But I know what I heard. And I know what I saw. That light. It didn't feel like rescue. It felt like something else. Like something passing through, using us as bait, discarding what it didn't need. I used to love hiking. The quiet of it, the smell of pine sap and damp earth, the way the sun cut through branches in golden stripes. It always made me feel small in the best way, like the forest was something older and bigger than all my problems. That was before the man in the woods, before the scars, before the chase that still keeps me awake years later. It was supposed to be just a day trip. My boyfriend, Marcus, had convinced me to take the trail that wound through the old logging roads outside of town. He said it was moderate difficulty, which was his way of saying he wanted a challenge, and I should keep up. Marcus was like that, competitive, restless. He loved me, I think, in his own way, but he had a way of pushing things. When I tripped over a root early on, he laughed instead of helping me up. When I slowed to catch my breath, he teased me for being out of shape. I wanted to snap at him, but instead I just smiled thinly and kept walking. By noon, the trail narrowed, twisting deeper into the pines. The air grew cooler, the silence heavier. No birds. No bugs. Just the crunch of our boots on needles. That's when Marcus disappeared. One moment he was ahead of me, 30 feet or so, his red backpack bobbing as he rounded a bend. The next, he was gone. "Marcus?" I called. My voice carried strangely, swallowed by the trees. No answer. I quickened my pace, heart picking up. The bend revealed only more trees, thick and endless. No Marcus. "Marcus, stop screwing around," I snapped. "This isn't funny." Still nothing. I walked faster, then jogged, then stopped completely, spinning in a circle. The forest pressed in on me, dark trunks stretching up like prison bars. That's when I smelled it. Rot. Not the sweet rot of fallen leaves, but something sour, rancid, like meat left in the sun. The silence broke with the sound of a twig snapping. I turned toward it and froze. There was a man standing among the trees. If you could call him a man. His skin was ruined. Scar tissue rippled across his face like melted wax, pulling his features into grotesque shapes. One eye was a milky white, the other too sharp, too bright. His lips were twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a snarl. And he was staring right at me. My throat closed. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He took a step forward. That broke me. I ran. The trail blurred under my feet, branches whipping my arms, roots clawing at my ankles. My lungs burned, my chest seared, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Behind me I heard him. Not running, walking. Slow, deliberate, as if he knew I couldn't get away. Every time I glanced back, he was closer. Always closer. His scarred face bobbing through the trees, that ruined smile fixed on me. I veered off the trail, plunging into the undergrowth. My legs tore on brambles, my clothes snagged on branches. The forest was endless. Every tree looked the same. "Marcus!" I screamed. My voice cracked, raw with terror. "Marcus, please!" No answer. The scarred man's footsteps grew louder. He wasn't even breathing hard, just following, relentless, like this was a game and he had all the time in the world. At one point, I tripped. My knee slammed into a rock, pain exploding white. I scrambled up, sobbing, blood soaking through my jeans. I could hear him behind me, so close now I could almost feel his breath. I ran until the trees thinned, until light flickered ahead. And then miracle. The road. I stumbled out of the woods into a gravel parking lot. A pickup truck sat idling near the trailhead, 2 men inside with hunting gear piled in the bed. They stared at me wide-eyed as I collapsed in front of them, gasping. "There's someone, he's after me," I choked out. They jumped from the truck, rifles in hand, scanning the trees. But the scarred man was gone. The forest behind me stood silent, empty, as if nothing had ever been there. The hunters drove me back to town. I reported Marcus missing, told the police everything. They searched for days, combed the woods with dogs, but they found nothing. No backpack, no footprints, no body, and no sign of the man I saw. The police looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe Marcus wandered off. Maybe I imagined the scarred man, some panic-fueled hallucination. But I know what I saw. I still see him. Sometimes in the reflection of a window. Sometimes in the blur of headlights at night. Always watching, always waiting. The scars. The smile. The slow, deliberate steps. I don't hike anymore. I can't. Forests feel wrong to me now, heavy with silence, pressing too close. And sometimes, when the wind cuts through the trees outside my house, I swear I hear footsteps. Slow, deliberate, patient, getting closer. I was 10 the summer my parents decided to go camping at Lake Rainier. It wasn't unusual for us. Dad loved the outdoors, Mom tolerated it for his sake, and I was just happy to roast marshmallows. The campground was packed that weekend. Families with RVs, kids running around barefoot, the smell of hot dogs drifting from a dozen fire pits. It felt safe in that way kids believe things are safe when there are other people around. I remember helping Dad set up our tent, hammering the stakes into the ground while he teased me for missing the angle. Mom spread sleeping bags inside, muttering about mosquitoes. By sunset, we were settled. The air was cool, cicadas buzzing in the trees. That's when I noticed him. Across the clearing, by the tree line, a man stood watching. He wasn't with a family, not that I could see. No tent, no car. Just a wiry figure in a dark jacket, hands shoved into his pockets. He didn't look away when I noticed him. His eyes followed me like he was studying something fragile. "Don't stare," Mom whispered when she saw me looking. "Some people just pass through. Focus on your food." So I tried, but all evening I felt his eyes. Even when we lit the fire. Even when we sat telling stories. He stood there until the light died, and then, like smoke, he was gone. I thought maybe I'd imagined him. I wish I had. That night, the woods were loud. Crickets, owls, the crack of branches in the distance. I was half asleep in my bag when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, dragging, crunching over leaves. Then a hand pressed against the tent wall. The nylon bowed inward just inches from my face, fingers tracing along the thin fabric. My breath caught. I wanted to scream, but fear pinned me silent. Another hand joined it, pressing down from the top, flattening the tent. Then a shadow leaned close, and through the thin nylon, I saw the vague outline of a face. "Dad," I whispered, shaking him. "Dad, someone's out there." He was up in seconds. My father wasn't the kind to hesitate. He grabbed the flashlight, unzipped the tent in one violent motion, and burst outside. I heard him shout, words I couldn't make out. A scuffle. Boots pounding the dirt. Then silence. I clutched my mother's hand in the dark. She whispered prayers under her breath, rocking me against her. When Dad returned, his face was pale. He locked eyes with Mom, something unspoken passing between them. "Go back to sleep," he told me. But I could still hear his heart hammering. Sleep didn't come easy. Every crack of a branch sent me rigid. Every gust of wind felt like breath against the tent. At one point, I swear I heard whispering outside, low and guttural, though I couldn't make out the words. By dawn, I was shaking with exhaustion. When I stepped outside, I saw what Dad hadn't wanted me to. The ground around our tent was covered in prints. Dozens of them. Boots, circling again and again, pressing so close they'd nearly trampled the stakes loose. The man had been walking around us all night. We reported it to the ranger station. They nodded, took notes, promised to keep an eye out. But nothing came of it. No arrests. No warnings. just a shrug and the reassurance that sometimes drifters wander through. But I remember my father's knuckles, split and raw, as though he'd struck something hard. I asked him once what happened when he unzipped that tent. His eyes went distant. He smiled at me, Dad said quietly, like he'd been waiting, and that was all he would say. I used to think monsters belonged to childhood. You grow up believing the stories, that shadows in the closet hold teeth, that under the bed lurks something waiting for your ankles. Then eventually you stop. You laugh at yourself for ever believing it. You get older, pay bills, raise kids, and tell yourself the only real monsters are people. But the night I saw the thing on my balcony, I learned that wasn't true. And I've never slept right since. It was one of those restless nights. The kind where no matter how you toss and turn, sleep won't come. My wife was beside me, already deep in dreams, one arm slung lazily across the sheets. From down the hall, I could hear the faint wheeze of our son's breathing. The room was hot, stifling, even though it was late October. I lay there for half an hour, listening to the hum of traffic below our apartment, the faint buzz of the refrigerator. Finally, I sighed, slipped out of bed, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The apartment was small but homey, toys scattered on the rug, dishes stacked on the counter, a cartoon magnet clinging crooked on the fridge. The kind of clutter that made me feel safe. Normal. I opened the refrigerator, the cold air spilling out like a blessing, and reached for a glass of water. I stood there, drinking slowly, staring at the shelves as though the right snack might appear if I stared long enough. That's when I felt it. Not a sound. Not a movement. A weight. The unmistakable sensation of eyes on me. The hairs on my neck rose. My chest tightened. Slowly, unwillingly, I turned toward the sliding glass door that led to the balcony. And that's when I saw it. At first, my brain told me it was a man. Someone tall standing outside on the narrow balcony, watching me through the glass. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it became. It was too tall. Its arms hung too low, fingertips brushing the railing. Its posture bent slightly sideways, as if bones inside weren't arranged like mine. Its skin was pale, almost gray, glowing faintly in the moonlight. And the face, Jesus Christ, the face. It was blank. Not masked, not hidden, but smooth. Like clay before an artist carves features. Just stretched skin, taut and faceless. Yet I knew it was looking at me. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, to wake my wife, to call the police. But I didn't move. Couldn't move. Some primal instinct whispered louder than thought. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Don't look away. So I stood there, water glass trembling in my hand, staring back at the thing staring at me. I don't know how long it lasted. A minute. An hour. Time seemed to melt. Then, the surface of its face rippled. The skin stretched, tore, and reshaped, until two pits formed where eyes should be. A slit split wide into a mouth. And it smiled. The grin was too wide, teeth too sharp, gums black and wet. I bit down on my fist to keep from screaming. The thing pressed a hand to the glass. Its fingers were long, skeletal, ending in cracked, yellow nails. Slowly, deliberately, it dragged them downward, nails squealing softly. My knees buckled. I gripped the counter to keep from collapsing. And then its face changed. The blankness rippled again, molding, shifting, until I was staring at myself. My own face. But wrong. Too pale. The eyes too big, glossy, unblinking. The smile stretched wider than my skin could stretch. I shook my head violently, whispering, "No, no, no." The face shifted again. My wife's. My son's. Each one distorted, monstrous, grinning with that impossible mouth. I wanted to run to their rooms, shield them, hide them. But if I moved, I knew the glass would shatter. I felt it deep in my bones. So I stayed, guarding, watching. The thing never blinked. I don't think it could, but I blinked. And every time my eyelids shut for even a fraction of a second, the thing seemed closer. Not much, just an inch, maybe two. Until it was pressed flush against the glass, its mouth opening wide enough to scrape teeth along the pane. The sound was unbearable. A wet squeal like fingernails dragged over metal. My chest heaved. My vision blurred. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might burst. And then I heard it. Not out loud. Not with my ears. But inside my head. "Let me in." The voice was my own. "Let me in." Again and again, echoing until it drowned every thought. At some point, I must have passed out standing there. Or maybe the hours bled together. All I know is that when the first light of dawn spilled across the kitchen, the thing shuddered. Its body convulsed, flickering like smoke caught in a draft. The grin collapsed into blank flesh once more. And then it was gone. Not walked away. Not climbed down. Just gone. The balcony stood empty. When my wife found me, I was still standing there, shaking, eyes bloodshot, handprints slick against the glass. She touched my arm, frowning. "Honey, what are you doing?" I tried to tell her. The words spilled out in broken gasps. She listened, but her face softened with pity. "You were dreaming," she said gently. "You fell asleep in the kitchen again. It was just a dream." But it wasn't. Because when I pressed my palm against the glass, my hand lined up perfectly with the greasy smear the thing had left behind. We moved 6 months later. Different apartment. Different city. I told myself it would help. That whatever I saw, whatever followed me, would stay behind. But it didn't. We hadn't camped together in years. Work had turned me into a ghost at home. Michelle and I spoke more through sighs than sentences, and the girls had become teenagers who mostly communicated with eye rolls. I thought a weekend away might fix something, or at least remind us what it felt like to sit around a fire instead of 4 separate screens. That's why I picked Lost Creek. It looked perfect online. Pine-lined trails, a glassy lake, campsites tucked into little coves of trees. Secluded, the website said. I wanted secluded. A break. We arrived late in the afternoon, winding down gravel roads until the signal dropped. No rangers at the booth, just a weather-faded map bolted to a post. Our site, number 27, was all the way at the end. The air smelled like damp earth and pine. The lake rippled like it was breathing. We set up camp, tent pitched, cooler in the shade, fire ring ready. For a while it felt good. Michelle hummed while unpacking. The girls filmed the lake for their phones, even though there was no service. I thought maybe I'd gotten this one right. That's when I heard it. A voice. "Hello? Anyone?" I straightened from the tent stakes, squinting into the trees. A woman's voice, faint but close. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Michelle looked up, frowning. "Hear what?" Another call, further left. "Help." The girls hadn't noticed. My pulse thudded, but I forced a smile. "Echoes over the lake," I said. "Sound carries weird here." But I couldn't shake the unease. By nightfall, the campsite felt swallowed. We had one lantern burning, its glow a fragile bubble in the dark. The tradition was a short night hike, something we'd always done together, but even as we started down the trail I felt wrong. The silence in the trees was heavy, too complete. The girls walked close behind me. Michelle stayed at my side. The beams of our flashlights jittered. And then, "Dad!" The word floated from ahead of us, high-pitched, our youngest's exact voice. She gasped behind me. I didn't. Michelle gripped my arm. "She's right here." Another voice came from the opposite side. My older daughter this time, but stretched, broken, like a recording chewed up and replayed. "Mom, come here." Every muscle in my body locked. I swallowed hard. "Bobcats," I said. "They can sound like people. Don't answer." We turned back, moving fast, flashlights trembling. The voices followed. Sometimes mine. Sometimes Michelle's. Always wrong. Back in the tent, I locked the zippers with a carabiner and tied a cord for good measure. Michelle and the girls huddled together. I sat by the flap, listening. The woods had gone silent. Too silent. Then the first touch came. A fingertip pressed against the nylon wall, dragging slow circles. Another hand joined it. The fabric bowed inward, brushing my shoulder. "Daddy," my youngest's voice whispered, inches from my face. But she was beside me, trembling. I pressed my palm against the zipper, holding it shut. "Don't answer," I whispered. "No matter what." The tent shivered as something moved around it. The fabric dipped as though a head pressed against it. I could smell copper, metallic and sharp, braided with something sweet, almost like incense. Voices rose outside. My name. Michelle's. The girls. All wrong, repeated again and again, syllables cracked, tempos sliding. Then one word emerged, chanted by dozens of mouths at once. Hungry. The chorus circled us, layered and relentless. Hungry. From one side. Hungry. From the other. Some high as children, some deep as thunder. The girls clung to Michelle. My hands shook against the zipper. And then the claw came through. The fabric tore in a clean line, letting in a sliver of moonlight. A tall shadow loomed, ribs visible beneath stretched skin, pits where eyes should have been. The stench hit like a wave. I thought that was it. Then a flood of white light washed over the tent. Not lantern light. Not headlights. Something purer, harsher. The things outside screamed. a dozen voices collapsing into a guttural wail. The tent walls buckled as shadows flinched away. Gunshots cracked. A man's voice barked. Move. The zipper ripped open. Rough hands pulled us out into the glare. Trucks lined the trailhead, spotlights searing the trees. Men in flannel and heavy boots fired into the dark. Shapes writhed just beyond the beams, shrieking as if the light itself burned them. We were shoved into the back of a truck. Michelle clutched the girls. My chest heaved. My ears rang. One of the men turned to me. His face was worn, his eyes flat. "You don't come back here," he said. "Not ever." I swallowed. "What were they?" He glanced at the trees. "Forest mimics. That's the name we use. They wear your voice, wear your sound until you follow. Once you answer, they don't stop." The truck rumbled down the gravel road, leaving the lake behind. I stared out the window, trying not to hear the echo still ringing in my skull. Hungry, we moved on with our lives. We had to, but the voices didn't leave me. I met Wendy at a hardware store, of all places. I was there to buy a tape measure for a shelf I was never going to hang. She was arguing with a clerk about the difference between contractor bags and the ones that tear when a twig looks at them. She won the argument. She won me about 3 minutes later. We called each other names. Not the mean kind, the kind you keep even when you move on. She called me city boy, even though my city was just big enough for one decent Thai place and a courthouse. I called her country girl because it fit. The boots, the sun-freckled shoulders, the calm way she moved like the ground knew her weight and approved. She didn't eat on our first date. I don't mean she ate a salad and left the croutons. I mean she didn't touch the menu. She ordered me a burger, waved off the waitress with a pretty apology, and drank water like it was just something to do with her hands. I tried to make a joke about metabolisms. She smiled, pressed her thumb into the back of my wrist, and said softly, "I eat. Just not like this." The way she said it opened a door in the room, and all the air changed. I didn't walk through it. I told myself there would be time. We went to her place a lot after that. It was a cabin that looked like a postcard until you noticed the heavy deadbolt on the door and the strange iron nails hammered into the lintel. The first time she invited me in, she pressed her palm flat against my chest like she was measuring something inside me and said, "There are rules." I nodded, though she didn't tell me what they were. We kissed like we were making a promise. She was warmer than anyone I'd ever touched, warm the way a stone is warm at dusk from hoarding sunlight all day. We'd end up tangled on her couch, my shirt up around my ribs, her mouth at my throat, my hand under the hem of her t-shirt feeling muscles that felt like spring steel. It would climb to the edge, and then she'd stop. Not push me away exactly. She'd shift, like the angle of the moon had changed on us, and we should respect that. I'd breathe into her hair, embarrassed by how much I wanted her, and she'd rub her cheek against my jaw like a cat and whisper, "Soon." It landed less like a promise than a weather report. When she finally invited me camping, I said yes too fast. She watched my face, pleased and wary at once, and told me to pack light. "We won't be far from the car," she said. "But far enough." "Bears?" I asked, trying to sound competent. She smiled at me like I'd told a cute joke. "I'll handle bears." We hiked in late, sun slung low. The forest there did that thing where it gets quiet all at once, like someone pressed a finger to the world's lips. Wendy set pace ahead of me, shoulders rolling, hair braided down her back. She kept glancing up at the canopy, not like a tourist, but like a mechanic listening for a problem he already knows is there. "You smell that?" she asked after a while. "Pine." She shook her head. "Under it." I did. It was faint at first, then not faint at all. Something sour and old, like wet fur locked in a trunk with meat gone bad. It had an edge of metal to it, a penny taste at the back of my tongue. I gagged. Wendy's expression didn't change, but the tendons in her neck shifted like a bow being strung. "We'll be past it soon," she said, and picked up speed. We found a spot on a slight rise above a little creek that whispered to itself like it knew gossip. She taught me a better way to pitch a tent. "You're fighting the wind, city boy. Make friends with it." Then kissed me hard with her hands in my hair, and the kind of low sound you make when you've found the exact thing you meant to reach for. Dinner was mine. She brought a steak for me and cooked it like she was teaching a master class. Hard sear, rest, a pinch of something from a twist of wax paper that smelled like rosemary and salt. She didn't eat. When I looked at her about it, she frowned at the fire, then at me, then kissed my bottom lip like she was apologizing. "I told you," she said. "I will. Not like this." We made love as the fire clicked itself down to coals. I'm not going to dress it up. It was slow and bright and a little desperate, the way you do it when you're too aware of your own skin. She pressed her palm to my sternum, and I felt my heart beat there like a trapped bird. She moved over me like she weighed more than gravity. When she came, she bit my shoulder, not enough to bruise, but enough to make my hands fist in the sleeping bag and pull the zipper's teeth the wrong way. After, she lay on top of me, and I ran my fingers along the ladder of her spine, counting. She fell asleep with her mouth open against my throat. It should have been the best sleep of my life. I woke to the smell. It curled into the tent like a thought. The metallic note was stronger, the rot swollen and flowery. The woods were so quiet the silence was a pressure on my eardrums. I could see the shadow of the trees on the tent like veined fingers. Wendy's arm was over my waist, heavy. Her breath slowed and even. For a second I told myself it was a dream, and a second is long enough for a decision to make itself. I lay there and waited for morning. We found the campsite wrecked when we stepped out. It looked like a dog had played house, gear scattered, cooler on its side, my pack dragged 5 feet and slashed like it insulted someone. The ground was a ledger, prints stamped into damp soil. The ones I knew, boots, raccoon, were easy. The others looked like somebody had glued 2 yawning commas to a stick and walked up on their toes. I knelt and put my hand in one. It swallowed my hand. Bear? I tried. Maybe, she said. Wendy. She put 2 fingers against my lips. They were warmer than my mouth. I'm sorry. I should have taken you somewhere easier. Something in the way she said taken you made me feel owned and safe at the same time. I nodded, and she kissed the place on my shoulder she had bitten last night. The day was almost good. We hiked a loop around the ridge, and she taught me plant names like spells, sweet fern, wintergreen, rattlesnake orchid, and corrected the ones I got wrong with a lazy grin. We crossed a meadow where the grass came to my hips, and the sun slid behind a cloud like a coin into a slot, the whole world dimming a click. We didn't talk about the smell. We didn't talk about the tracks. She walked a little ahead of me, though, and now and then I saw the shadow of her jaw tighten. At camp she kissed me like she'd been thinking about it all afternoon. It got urgent fast. She stripped my shirt with both hands, impatient, and the cool air made my skin pucker. I ghosted my hands under her sweater and felt heat there, coiled, like we were camped on top of a hot spring that only she knew the map to. We lost track of the zipper again. She climbed onto me, and I saw the stars over her shoulder and thought, stupidly, about being a child on a Ferris wheel and not wanting it to end. It ended when she froze. She went still in a way that wasn't human. Not a flinch, not a stop, still like water when wind dies. Her head turned toward the creek. Her eyes reflected starlight for a second like a dog's. I felt the change in her body where it met mine, muscles organizing themselves toward a different project. What is it? I whispered. She slid off and crouched, naked, her hair falling over one shoulder in a rope. Stay in the tent, she said. The words didn't carry panic. They didn't carry explanation either. She reached for the flap with one hand. I grabbed her wrist. Not hard, but it was a mistake I remember in my body the way you remember a burn. She looked back at me, and the eyes that met mine were not the eyes I'd made love to. They were too bright, the pupils wrong, the irises a shade I couldn't name. Her nails extended under my hand. No noise, no drama, just growth, crescents lengthening until their tips grazed my palm. The fine hair on her forearms stood up like she was hearing notes I couldn't. For half a heartbeat I was terrified. The other half I was something else. A pulse of heat low in my belly, shameful and clean at once. She must have felt my fingers tighten. She smiled the kind of smile that would make saints sin. Later, she said, and slipped out into the dark. The night breathed in. Something out there made a sound I've only heard on videos played too loud in bad bars. A cross between an elk's bugle and a person trying not to scream. It came from too high up to belong to anything with deer legs. It came with its own smell in a wave so dense it had a texture. I gagged into my fist. The call changed pitch mid-note like a throat full of knives. Then I heard her. She answered. It started human, a barwoman's laugh yanked low in her chest, then stretched into a note that lifted the hair on my arms. It vibrated the tent poles. It vibrated my sternum, the place she'd pressed her palm. It was challenge and warning and invitation, and it made my mouth fill with heat. I crawled to the door and eased the zipper down an inch. I saw the meadow in the blue of almost moon. I saw antlers first, too many tines, each tip darkened with something I told myself was pitch. The thing that owned them was tall enough to make the tree line look shorter. Its arms ended in hands too long to be any animal's and too wrong to be a person's. Its chest looked starved, but its teeth didn't. To the left, a blur. Wendy hit it low and heaved, using the full hinge of her hips, flipping it in a violence that looked like dance. I didn't see fur, not really. I saw a suggestion of fur, and then I saw muscle and light. She moved like she'd practiced with gravity and won. They rolled. The thing gored the ground where her ribs had been with an antler, and she was already somewhere else. I watched her jaws close on the tendon above its collarbone. I watched her hind legs, hind, drive into its belly with a kick that thudded the dirt. It screamed in a pitch I don't have a name for. The woods answered, cracks of branches, smaller shapes skittering away. The tent rippled with the breath of it, like a sail. I swallowed a sound that wasn't a word and wasn't a prayer either. She took it high then low. It tossed her on the rack of its antlers, and for a second the moon put them both in a terrible halo. She slid free like water. The earth gave back the blood she asked it for. She climbed the length of it with her mouth, not like a lover, like a person starved for a kind of food you don't admit exists. I had the sudden irrational thought that if she looked at me right, then I would walk out to her and kneel. She didn't look at me. She finished what she had to do. I closed the zipper with my teeth and lay on my back with my hands over my face. I could hear myself breathing like I had been running. My shoulder throbbed where she had bitten me the night before, and when I touched it my fingers came away slick. The smell seeped into the tent, copper and winter. I shook like a man in a fever and couldn't tell if it was fear or want. It was both. Dawn unspooled slow. The tent glowed like a lung. I slept in a series of stumbles and woke to the sound of the creek as if it had just been invented. When I crawled out, I was alone. There were new marks in the dirt. Some were nothing I could catalog. Some were bare human feet, small. I sat at the cold fire ring and wrapped my arms around my ribs and listened for birds. They came back in pieces like a choir assembling. She returned at mid-morning wearing my hoodie and her hair braided tight. She looked like herself again except for the eyes, which took a second longer than they should have to focus on my face like she was remembering where to aim them. She stopped a few feet away, searching me, and I realized she was looking for fear. "Are you okay?" I asked. It sounded backwards as it left my mouth. She huffed a laugh, then winced like some laugh inside her hurt. "You're asking me?" I nodded. I didn't trust my legs. "I'm sorry," she said, and sat beside me. The hoodie slid up her thigh. I looked away and then didn't. "I should have told you. I didn't want to tell you and lose you. That was selfish." "You didn't lose me," I said. It surprised me how true it felt. "What was that?" She looked at the trees, not at me. "A wendigo," she said. The word tasted wrong in the morning air. Or what one of the old words points at, anyway. Not a story. Not a costume. A hunger that wears things, and wears people, until nothing fits anymore. "I'm not one of those," she added quickly, turning her face back to mine, sudden panic there. "I'm not." "You're not," I said. I took her hand. It was warm, the way it always was. "I know." Her throat worked. "I hunt them," she said softly. "I kill them when they come too close to the places where we live. There are others who do too. It's not a guild. Not a club. It's older than that. My mother taught me how to track, and what to do with my breath, and when to eat, and what not to look at if I wanted to keep being a person." She squeezed my fingers hard. "You should go if you want to go." I stared at our joined hands, at the little places where the dirt had become part of us. "I don't want to go." "City boy," she said, a warning and a caress. "Country girl," I said back, and she laughed for real then, the first real laugh since the night before, and put her forehead against mine like we were teenagers under a bleacher. We packed slowly. We left more slowly. She shouldered both packs without making a speech of it. When we reached the car, she put her palm against my chest again, where my heartbeat lives, and measured. Whatever she was measuring, it didn't scare her. She kissed me like a person who had just eaten and was still hungry for a different thing. We didn't talk much about it after. I wanted to. Sometimes sentences formed in my mouth and then dissolved before I could say them. She stayed at my place more. She ate sometimes. A bite of this. A handful of that. She slept wrapped around me like I was the last warm thing in a cold world, and sometimes I woke to her lips on my neck and the sound in her chest that wasn't human and never would be, and I let it move through me because I knew she was holding it back for me, and that knowledge made me hotter than shame and cleaner than prayer. Once, weeks later, I woke to the metallic smell braided with incense and heard something heavy scrabble on the roof. She was already sitting up, a silhouette against the window, the white of her eyes bright in the dark. "It's passing," she murmured. "It knows I'm here. Are you here?" I asked, and she turned and smiled and threaded her hand into mine under the sheets. Her nails grazed my hip, longer than last night, and my breath took itself without my permission. She felt it and made a please sound low in her throat and kissed me, not soft. This is not a story about a man who saved a woman or a woman who saved a man. This is a story about hunger in its plural forms, and the shocking fact that some of them can be tended, and some must be fed, and some can only be stood beside with your hands steady and your eyes open, knowing they could take you and trusting they won't. I grew up in Greenville, a valley town where pine pitch lived in your clothes and gossip moved faster than the mail. Folks called it blessed, air sharp as creek water, ridges green as wallpaper. But Greenville kept secrets, and if you stayed long enough, you stumbled over them. The first time I did, I was 8. My dad took me camping at Wolf Gap. The night was all cicadas and the hiss of his Coleman lantern, until a scream tore the dark in half. It was an animal, not machine. It shook my teeth. Dad came running, rifle in hand, face pale, and fired into the trees. For a heartbeat the flash lit something hanging from a branch, tall, thin, jointed wrong. Then silence, heavy and listening. We didn't talk about it. In Greenville, you learned early what not to say. By 16, my best friend Douglas and I knew every deer path that tied the valley together. We also knew the rules whispered by older cousins. Don't whistle after dark, don't say certain names, and don't go into caves you didn't see carved by water. We broke most rules until the day Birch Run broke us. We'd wandered past the last trail blaze, dusk crawling over the ridges. That's when we heard it, footsteps in the brush, matching our stride for stride. We stopped. So did they. I glanced left and caught a figure between the trees. Human-shaped, but twitching like a bad video feed. Then a voice behind us, my voice. "Hey, look." I froze. Douglas grabbed my arm. We ran. Branches clawed us, roots tried to trip us, but the sound followed, then lifted above us, something moving in the canopy. We didn't stop until Ranger Road opened in front of us. We told no one. Fear's easier to carry folded small. The summer Jessica vanished, Greenville felt hollow. She was 17, a cashier at the market, the kind of pretty that made people invent stories. One morning, she simply didn't show up. Search parties spread over the ridges. Douglas and I got assigned a grid northeast, where heat stuck under the trees. By noon we found a cave slit in the hillside, blowing cool air. She might have sheltered in there, Douglas said, hope trembling in his voice. Inside, the passage forced us belly down, then opened into a chamber slick with limestone. Our headlamps caught a rust smear on the wall. "Jessica?" Douglas called. His voice didn't echo, it vanished. Then came the reply. "I'm here." A girl's voice, thin, desperate. It came from a crawlspace barely big enough for a dog. "I'm here." Douglas crawled toward it, shoulders wedged. I grabbed his ankle. Something in that tone was wrong. The syllables bent, the stress backwards. Under the girl's voice was another, wearing it like a coat. "Help!" It tried next, chewing the word. We scrambled out, gasping, daylight stabbing our eyes. We said nothing about what we'd heard. Jessica never came back. Months later, black SUVs arrived at the ranger station. No plates. Men and women in suits that didn't belong in our woods. They carried long blue cases and spoke low over maps. "Routine assessment," one told me when I asked. "Modeling fire risk." "There's no fire," I said. "There's always a fire," he replied. 6 days later, lightning supposedly struck. The ridge lit up like a matchbook. By nightfall, ash fell on our porches like snow. The fire roared for 2 days, chewing everything northeast. Then it stopped, sudden like someone shut a door. The news called it luck. No homes lost. Healthy reset. But when we hiked the edge after, the forest looked flayed. Stumps smoldering, rocks split pink, the air sharp with iron. The silence there didn't feel empty. It felt crowded. People called it over. I knew better. The caves no longer exhaled coolness. Now they breathed damp air that smelled like wet fur and incense. Animals acted wrong. Squirrels freezing mid-run, cattle standing miles from pasture, dogs howling not at doors but at floorboards. Sometimes near culverts or sinkholes, I heard voices, my mother calling dinner, or my own voice saying my name. I never answered. Douglas left town. My dad stopped camping. Greenville moved on, as it always did. But I can't, because fire doesn't erase hunger. It only drives it deeper. Last June, a boy caught a trout in the river. Its belly was full of polished stones. He lined them in a circle on his windowsill. His mother scolded, made him put them away. By morning, the circle had rebuilt itself, wet, more perfect. The boy swore he'd heard someone whisper his name in the dark, his grandfather's voice, though the man was asleep 2 rooms away. And me? I still walk past cave mouths, careful not to linger. Yet sometimes I swear the air presses against me, warm and damp, like a hand closing over my mouth. The fire didn't end it. It just pushed Greenville's horrors underground, where the limestone runs deep and the roots go farther than we dare follow. And every night, when the pines creak, I hear it practicing my name.